So this year at Nomad Capitalist Live, our sold-out live event, we talked about 5 types of new tax havens, many of which you might not have thought about, where you could go and pay either zero tax or very low rates of tax, all legally. Now, despite the fact that you don't have to go to Monaco or Vanuatu or the UAE to get a zero tax rate to have a low tax bill, what I did share with the audience was there are some specific reasons why I believe tax-free strategies are going to become more important. I'm going to share with you what I mean and why right now. Hi, I'm Andrew Henderson, the author of this book, and I'm the founder of Nomad Capitalist, where we help 7- and 8-figure entrepreneurs and investors legally go where you're treated best. You can learn more at nomadcapitalist.com. Now, one of the things that happened at Nomad Capitalist Live this year was Mikhail Saakashvili, former president of Georgia, who had come in the early 2000s and taken the number of taxes from almost 24, slashed it down to 5 or 6, flattened the rates, and basically said that you need to have people come and vote if you wanted to raise their taxes. You know, he talked about the power of getting people to agree to big sweeping changes. The reality is most countries around the world have not worked that successfully. Most countries around the world are too big, to have too much bureaucracy, are too committed to the status quo, whatever the case may be, to say, let's go from extremely ridiculous taxes to a couple of low flat taxes that you can't raise without a lot of hassle. And so what's happening right now in the world is you're seeing most countries go in the opposite direction. And President Saakashvili told me, he said, when I came in, the IMF and all the other letter organizations said, you're crazy to lower taxes. You've got so many problems. He didn't listen, and it all worked out. Georgia went from the 127th best place to do business in the world to about 8th. And so other countries have not learned that lesson. The legacy brand countries, chances are you may live in one or be a citizen of one or both, are going the opposite direction, where if you are successful, if you've made money by taking risks, if you've built a business, if you're a trader, whatever that may be the case, you are now the enemy. They want to raise your taxes. And so what I announced was I'm putting more tax-free strategies into my portfolio, whether they're active tax-free strategies where I'm actively going to live, actively going to run my business, actively going to hire, or they're more passive. I'm going to keep them in my back pocket, perhaps a citizenship in a country that I don't live in, but it's there and it's waiting for me. That, I think, is going to be very important in the years to come. I'm doing this because I believe there will always be places to go where you're treated best. We've talked about countries like Uruguay that came out and said, we're not going to raise taxes on people to clean up this mess. I believe there will always be countries like this. Doug Casey and I talked about that. It's just my general belief. There will always be somewhere to go. But what I'm trying to do with tax-free as part of my portfolio is find the most secure countries, because what are we seeing right now? There have been rumors for some time. Costa Rica may be ditching its territorial tax regime, for example. And so what do you do if that happens? Well, we talked about that, but what do you do if that happens? And where do you go? Well, you can't be in Costa Rica anymore. Other countries have been trying to move to territorial regimes, but it's sometimes slow. What Mikhail Saakashvili did, and why I invited him to speak, was he made so many changes. None of us is perfect, but he made so many changes very quickly, and by going against the grain and going against the special elite interests. And a lot of countries aren't going to be able to do that. And so you look at a country that's tax-free, for example, the Cayman Islands, not technically a country, but as a jurisdiction, they are pretty much opposed to direct taxation as a culture, okay? And so you look at a lot of countries with zero tax, it is part of their culture. Now you look at places like Andorra. It had the misfortune of being located between 2 of the most aggressive taxation entities on planet Earth, Spain and France. And so they had to get into the game of having a low income tax. But that was difficult and it took a long time. And so for me, tax-free means, obviously it's tax-free. There's no conditions. It's not like Portugal's program where you go there and for 10 years you get a tax exemption that works for some, but you got to be careful because it's got holes poked all over the Swiss cheese of tax exemptions, right? It's not like a Chile or a Uruguay or some of these countries where you go and you get a fixed number of years, or a non-dom program, right? It is tax-free. Now, an island like Antigua in the Caribbean, for example, if you run a business, there are certain things you need to do on the corporate side. So tax-free on the business side may not be the same as tax-free on the personal side. But I think having residence permits, citizenships, and companies in places that are legitimately tax-free, even if they're not your main entity, is going to be increasingly important. And I announced at the conference something that I'm doing personally that I plan to share with you later about what I'm doing in a big way on tax-free citizenships. If you want to hear more about that, leave a comment below. We'll make sure that we get that out to you. There are a couple of countries in the citizenship by investment game that are legitimately tax-free. Antigua has no personal income tax. St. Kitts and Nevis has no personal income tax. Vanuatu, which is a program I like a lot less, has no income tax. Now, I did the St. Lucia program years ago. Do I regret that? No, I think it's been a great program. It's worked out very well. If things got terrible and I had to go and live somewhere, my philosophy between getting married, having a much bigger business, just having whole life circumstances, growing as a person, have evolved where St. Lucia fit a great part in my life. I was increasingly distancing myself from the US. I wanted to plan to get out of the US, and I put together a passport portfolio that helped me do that. And so St. Lucia played a great role. Now, if I wanted to go and live in St. Lucia, it is certainly a better tax situation than many countries in the world, but it's not perfect. And so I think that in terms of getting citizenship, if your goal is, I may need to live in this place someday, I think tax-free is not a bad idea. Now, I was talking to one guy at the conference. He's trying to collect all 5 of these Caribbean citizenships. Each, there's different benefits because some offer different travel benefits. There's one of them right now that's not tax-free, but it's the only one of the 5 that can get into a couple of different countries that all of them have visa-free access to, but they're all closed except for this one. So I'm not saying that you shouldn't get a passport portfolio. I'm not saying you should go entirely tax-free. What I'm saying is having a tax-free country citizenship where you knew they were always going to let you in and you had a tax-free place to go and live. If everything else fell apart, would be a good idea. Tax-free residence. Monaco, certainly rather old school at this point, but Dubai. If I'm starting a company today, I'm going to consider Dubai over a Hong Kong, over a Caribbean jurisdiction, over something else, because yes, I'm going to pay more. Yes, there's a lot of complexity in some ways with the free trade zones and how do you set it up and how do you adapt, and it takes a while to get used to that. Yes, there's less flexibility in banking there that can be fixed, but that gets you a residence permit. You know where properties have been going through the roof lately? It's not just some of these red states in the US, but it's actually in Dubai. Look at downtown Dubai. I was looking a year ago and I felt prices hadn't gone down enough. And now prices are going way up because I think other people are finding out that a place that had a somewhat orderly response to things over the last year, and that has a zero tax policy, and that it has some heft, unlike a Vanuatu, for example, to keep that. I think Vanuatu will be fine on the tax front. They're so neutral where they're located. But some of these countries, like in Andorra, may have an issue. The UAE has enough heft that I believe they'll be able to keep those tax-friendly policies for some time. And by the way, when I say tax-free, people always say, oh, they started adding a VAT. I'm talking about where a 7- and 8-figure entrepreneur investor is being taxed in a big way. That's income, that's capital gains, and that's other things that follow that. And so I would look at a jurisdiction like that to set up a company. I would look at collecting residence permits in places where they had great tax deals, because anyone can introduce a new tax. I'm not saying there's anything wrong with St. Lucia. I think if that's part of your plan, you should go about it. But what I'm saying is it may be worth paying a little bit more to get the tax-free country, because it's harder to introduce taxes than it is to raise them. And so knowing that you have that zero tax, knowing that you're locked in, and it gives you some certainty. Markets love certainty. Businesses love certainty. It allows you to go out and take more risks, grow your business faster. Even if something changes 10 years from now, if a country goes the way of Andorra, introduces a mild income tax, nothing wrong with paying 5 or 10% if you like living in a place, if you decide to make that your home. It wouldn't be the end of the world, but at least you can get a jump start on things now and you have a greater level of certainty. Potentially fewer filings than you'd find in some territorial tax jurisdictions or a non-dom or a lump sum jurisdiction. Fewer hoops to jump through. You just walk in and it works out of the box. So understand there's a difference between tax residence, and citizenship. But you can accumulate those things, right? You can obtain a residence permit in a country where you may be able to visit 1 or 2 or 7 days a year. You keep that in your back pocket. And if you've got to move somewhere else, you've got a tax-friendly place, a tax-free place already lined up and ready to go. I think buying a property in somewhere like that, I think properties in these places are going to go up. Cayman Islands, for example. Properties are incredibly expensive. Why? Because it is the crown jewel of Caribbean zero tax jurisdictions. You can go to Bahamas, doesn't function quite as well. Nothing wrong with Bahamas, but it's not going to function quite as well. Dubai, one of the best functioning, everything works, people from all over the world, international. If you don't do the job right, you get sent home. Zero tax jurisdiction, not a bad place to have an anchor. Not saying to move there. I'm saying it might be worth doing something, whether it's buying a property, starting a company, what have you, to have that available to you. I'm not even saying you have to move to a zero tax or a low tax jurisdiction right now. I'm just saying have it ready. And I'm saying as you think about this, realize that politicians around the world are not only raising taxes in high countries. I don't think that every country around the world is going to be bullied into raising taxes. But I do think there may be some changes And the easiest way to protect yourself is having tax-free. Nothing wrong with the other strategies. I would simply add a layer of tax-free on top of what I was already doing to make sure that I'm protected. How can Nomad Capitalist help you? 4 ways. Number 1, subscribe to our channel and click the notification bell to make sure you get our new video every day. Number 2, get a copy of Nomad Capitalist, the book. You'll learn a lot of my personal experiences over a dozen years of studying this stuff, as well as exactly some of the strategies that you can use to build your Nomad Capitalist plan. Number 3, if you're not sure where to start, but you want to come and learn from my team and I, you want to come and mingle with like-minded people, learn more about our live conference, Nomad Capitalist Live. It's coming up soon. And number 4, if you want some help right now because you've got a burning issue, you need something solved, you want to lower your taxes, get a second passport, or build the Nomad Capitalist lifestyle of your dreams, go to nomadcapitalist.com and click on Become a Client.